Yep, and we should be live. Good
Excellent.
evening, everyone, from all the way from cold Norway. At least not cold today. Um, and Eric, you could say hi to the folks listening.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for the invite, William.
Yeah, it's great to have you on as well. And welcome to another episode of Everything Outside Code. And today I have a fantastic guest. Eric already said hi to you, but he's going to be doing a lot of talking today, not myself. Eric is great at podcasts. And today we're actually just going to be talking about podcasts, how it impacts B2B businesses or just any other business, how you could use it to drive brand awareness, how you could start one, what works and what doesn't work. So you should come out of this stream with, a firm understanding of why everyone has a podcast, including myself and Eric that I'm speaking to. If you're listening on YouTube, just hit the like button. It's somewhere down here, and follow this conversation. I usually have these every Wednesday, and I talk to awesome guests like Eric. So over to you, Eric. Could you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit more about yourself, what you do, and how you got here.
Absolutely. So, my name is Eric Rutherford. I am the founder of Build That Podcast, and that is a podcast production agency. We both help launch podcasts. So, doing it from the front end, like going from 0 to 1, like just starting from scratch, as well as helping businesses who have started a podcast or who are trying to figure out both the front end, so pre-production, like how do I get this thing running smoothly,
Yeah.
post-production to things like, okay, I've recorded my stuff. What do I do with it now? So that's kind of what we do. Also, we're launching the B2B PodCon this fall, November, a B2B podcast conference here in Nashville, Tennessee, here in the U.S. Excited about that. Got some great info for that as well. But primarily, I got into this by accident.
Okay.
I was talked with some friends back in 2020. Was trying to promote a product. They're like, "Dude, you just need to start a podcast." I'm like, "Okay." And I put it off. I put it off, and then I finally bought into it. I'm like, "Okay." So I got some help because I didn't know anything, and so worked with a great guy named David, and he got me up and running, and I recorded, and he did all the editing, and I did 10 episodes, and that was it. And I just let it go. It was a
Wow.
season. And what was fascinating was this was in the fall of 2020.
Hmm.
And even in March of 2021, I was still seeing downloads. Now, like I quit marketing the thing, like after the last
Okay.
episode, like in October, November, like there was no promotion of this thing at all. And I was
Hmm.
still seeing downloads on a weekly basis, not huge numbers, but like for what I was putting into it, it was pretty
Yeah.
significant. And I realized, wow, there's something to this. And so I ended up taking that podcast and running it through about almost 100 episodes and kind of put
Yeah.
it on hiatus. And in the process, what I did was I figured out how to actually produce it and do it on my own and do, sort of soup to nuts, the whole thing. And I'm a marketer. So I've done product marketing for a bunch of years. I do content marketing. And then really about 2022, I'm like, I want to build something. So
Yeah.
I started saying, okay, let's figure out what we can do with podcasts. It was the sweet spot for me in terms of niche, in terms of what I enjoy doing and what I do well. And so I
Hmm.
launched a new podcast and really kind of rolled out this business. And like before, I'm doing everything backwards because like I had been on LinkedIn forever, but I never shared or posted or did anything like that. Like I was the most scared social media person out there. So it was just like
Yeah.
starting from scratch and really all of that. That's kind of how it got going and got to this point. And now, man, I just think there's so much untapped potential in
Wow.
podcasts.
That's interesting. I love when you said, for the amount of effort you put in, the value was just immense. Is that still the same?
It is because one of the fascinating aspects of podcasts
Hmm.
is they are evergreen. So like when I find a show, I'll listen to something current and then I'll just start going back through the catalog and I'll
Yeah.
just start going backwards. And like, I'm listening to shows and going back 3 or 4 years and
Mm-hmm.
still listening to things. And so that's one of the powerful aspects of it is once you create a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
you can leverage that going forward. It never goes, it's not like
Yeah.
a social post, which, disappears. It seems like
Yeah.
quick. It's like they're for the long haul. And so I
Yeah.
love that about it.
Yeah. So the fact that podcasts are evergreen, do you think like producers or the creators, they make some conscious effort to keep it evergreen, or they just like talk like we're doing now and it's just timeless?
I think I think it depends. I think it's one of those things where you can approach it different ways. I think for businesses especially,
Mm-hmm.
go into it with this idea of, man, I want to create something that doesn't have to be perfect. I want it to be
Yeah.
good, but at the same time, man, I want to be able to use this thing. Like, I want to be
Yeah.
able to send, these episodes out, for a long time forward and refer back to them in a lot of different
Yeah.
aspects.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. Obviously, it has to be useful for sure. And speaking of use, you talked about creating a podcast or recording them, a couple of episodes for a product. How did that transform the product? Like, did it have any impact on the product, or it was just the podcast?
At that point, it helped with some of the distribution. Again, it was one of those
Mm-hmm.
sort of bootstrap things. But what I've learned is since then, I've learned that how to use it better. So, like some of the podcasts, the podcast I'm doing now is definitely
Mm-hmm.
something where it's getting more visibility, it's drawing more audience, but it's the goal is not the podcast, the goal is the services, and that's where I
Yeah.
think the opportunity is there, especially for businesses, really just to be able to to have those conversations and build trust with
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. That piques my interest because now I think I'm taking a bit of a segue to how podcasts impact like businesses, both from like a brand standpoint to product growth standpoint and just overall GTM. What's your take on that? How have you seen that play out? What's a typical, if there's a pipeline of some sort or an arbitrary one, what does that look like?
It's one of those things where it just depends on the company itself, but I think in terms of the funnel, the way to think of it is, one, you have to think of it as a long-term play. It's not
Okay.
virality, but then it is layered, because what the podcast does is at first you can use it to um, you really can use it to build awareness as you share it, as you get
Hmm.
guests on it. Then you use it to build trust as those episodes go out, as you begin sharing those, as you're building relationships with people you interview. You then start using the content from that to start moving people down the funnel. And that's really the goal, because
Hmm.
what your goal is, podcasts build trust amazingly well, because think about what other place can you actually have somebody listen to you for 30 minutes,
Yeah.
like uninterrupted, like nowhere, like
Yeah.
it's impossible. And
That's a
yet
lot of attention to hold.
it
Yeah.
is, it is. And so, somebody listens to 3 or 4 of your podcasts, they hear your inflection, they hear your personality, they hear your expertise, and suddenly, hey, I kind of trust this person. Like, what else are they
Yeah.
doing? And it sort of builds from there. And really the goal with the podcast then becomes, can I take content from it and use it
Hmm.
elsewhere? Can I get other people sharing it so that it builds, from sales? Honestly, man, podcasts are great for your sales team, just to be able to have something they can share with people. Like, hey, what's your
Yeah.
company about? And even doing some specific episodes for sales teams, just from,
Oh,
like, think objection handling. I mean, what are your 10 biggest objections that you run
yeah.
into? And it's like, wow, they can do a 3 to 5 minute episode for each objection, make them available, and suddenly your sales team can just
Yeah.
at the snap of a finger can start sending this out without them having to make a phone call.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, definitely. That is amazing. I just think about it, just recording these episodes and seeing that they're podcasts. So it's going to be pretty low effort. Because I do know something that a lot of content creators at least refrain from, or at least are scared of. The challenge they have is with editing videos, right? Editing video editing in general is just a pain, right? So how do you think that barrier at least could be skipped for this podcast, for instance? It's just free form record a live stream, it just goes on however it goes. But for some, they need to polish it, and I think this ties a lot into what you do as well. How important is that piece of making it great? And this is something again, keeping in mind that founders and other marketing folks just suck at that production process. How important is it?
It's you want good quality, but at the same time, you can overproduce. So
Okay.
it's a balance. It's one of those things where because podcasting, in many ways, you can leave in a few ums and ahs, and that's okay. Because what what's fascinating is when people listen to an episode, like unless there is just something very, very distracting in someone's manner of
Hmm.
speech, you just don't notice it because it's like you're sitting down to have a cup of coffee with them, and it
Yeah,
just it slides
that's
right on
true.
by. So, but at the
Yeah.
same time, there is some editing that should go into it, especially with the video. So it can be overwhelming if you're a good video editor. It still takes
Hmm.
time. I did an audit with somebody a couple of weeks ago. They were talking through their process, and it took a few hours to get it done.
Yeah.
And there is that time. There are definitely tools out there to help with that, some
Hmm.
better than others. And so, I think there's some things that you can do to help with the editing, and it ultimately
Yeah.
depends on the end goal. So if you want to create just like this is a fabulous format because just like you're
Okay.
doing, you do live stream, you put it out there, everybody knows it's live.
Yeah.
So it's as it is wonderful. And then you can also do clips. So taking that and there are definitely some softwares out there to make clip generation a lot easier. And
Hmm.
and I use those, and I think they're amazing. So
Yeah.
I think there's definitely time involved, especially even on the audio portion, because you want your audio to sound clean. So sometimes there's a little bit of engineering that goes into that. It's not
Okay.
crazy engineering, but you still want your balances to sound good and
Yeah.
your cuts to sound good. So there's definitely some work involved. And a lot of times it is easier to outsource that. Like unless you
Hmm.
just have some people on your team who are good at that and who like doing
Hmm.
that and they actually have the time to do it. That's the key.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, a lot of times it's easier to outsource.
Yeah. Do you feel like outsourcing also helps with being consistent? Because I know a lot of creators that want to, dabble into podcasts and stay consistent at it. It's just the effort to produce it and manage it and distribute it. It just after the first one, they're like, this is just so much effort. The actual recording is less effort, but everything that goes, around it and support it is just so much time for them.
It is like what we're doing right now. This is like the dessert part. This is the cherry on top.
Yeah.
This is the sweet part. But you're
Yeah.
right. What happens is it sounds good, but businesses will get into it and they'll get a few episodes in and realize, wow, I had
Mhm.
no idea it was going to take this much time. I talked with one
Yeah.
company and they're like, we made like 3 episodes and like we were just done. We just couldn't manage it anymore. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
there is definitely this overwhelm. So when you walk into it as a business, you really want to think, okay, can I pay to have it done or do I have the hours to have the support? So yeah, outsourcing
Hmm.
for consistency. If
Yeah.
the only thing you have to do is say, great, here's my recording, I'm done. Oh my word. That's
Yeah.
that's a
That's
huge, huge burden lifted.
Yeah, yeah, definitely it is. Something that you mentioned, a while at the start of this podcast was, I think it was folks expecting the outcomes from the podcast to be short term. It's like I put out a podcast. I want to see some results now, without thinking that it's, this, you're going to get results more longer term. Um, this is a misconception. What other things or what other areas do you see people get wrong when it comes to podcasting and creating podcasts? Do
Yeah,
any of these come to mind?
yeah, no, great question. And yeah, the one is it's long, not short. Another is it takes more work than you think. Even
Mm-hmm.
with the tools, even with the AI, even with all the other stuff, it takes more work than you think. A third is you have to market it a whole lot harder than you ever imagined. It's
Okay.
it's one of those things where if you were to go back, as I've talked with people, if you were to go back 7, 8 years, go back to 2016, 2017, if you had a podcast, like you could just blow up overnight in many cases
Yeah.
because there just weren't that many out there. At the moment, I mean, there's still, it's not like the market's oversaturated. It's not. It's just people are using them more effectively. And so
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't go viral like that. So what you have to
Yeah.
do is you have to plan on, okay, I have to get this in front of people. I have to get on shows. I need to have people on my show. I need to do some swaps. I need to do a lot of marketing. So from a download perspective, it just doesn't move
Mm-hmm.
quick, but it
Yeah.
requires just like a lot of effort put into the marketing. I think that's another misconception. It's like, oh, we built one. Well, that's great. But
Yeah.
it doesn't do anything. Um,
Wow.
yeah. So I think those are three of the things.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are great. Thanks. I just thought about a problem that I have when I look at like full life cycle of creating a podcast and putting it out there. Um, I would love to get on more podcasts, right? Because it's less effort for me to create content in that way. Just share what I have, like share my thoughts with someone else. And I think I'm fairly decent at having just a great conversation with someone
Oh
on a
yeah.
podcast. But it's been pretty difficult finding them. Also because I don't have the time to, scour the internet and try to find relevant ones that are great. And the hosts are also like, good folks. And I know I'm gonna enjoy this podcast. Do you have any approach to, finding podcasts to be on?
Yeah, that's a great question. They're really sorry. I am looking up something um, as we speak. Just to give you a name, the hard part with it is you've got up until recently, search and distribution has been poor. I don't know. That's the best way
Yeah.
I could say it. So it's hard to find shows. It's hard to search for shows. So really, you were kind of limited to just doing the searches on your own or going through different placement agencies. There are definitely a lot of businesses out there who work to place guests on podcasts. So you can definitely
Oh,
work with someone like that to where you would pay them however much and they would get you on however many podcasts a month, a quarter,
yeah.
whatever that is. So that's one way to outsource it. There are some other ways um, that are coming into that are becoming more available. There's this company called Pod Engine, and I've been doing some beta testing for them. They do they're doing some cool stuff with AI where they're able to, they're doing taking transcripts that are out there and giving you the ability
Hmm.
to search from an RSS feed. And so you can do some things that way where you can do some keyword searches and say, okay, what shows are like, fit this category. And instead of
Yeah.
going to Google, which is a little murky and doesn't do a real good job with podcast searches, you can go there and
Hmm.
they're giving you some information and you can track down some contact info as well. So
Yeah.
that's the other
Huh.
trick, and that's the hard part is once you find a podcast, is finding the person who
Yeah.
is the right finding the gatekeeper, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
And even more, it's trying to find those shows that wherever you are in your business and in your profile and in your brand that you
Hmm.
can get on because
Yeah.
the big name shows, like, unless you're a big name, it's hard to get on there.
I'm not going to try to get in the all in pod.
Yeah,
one of those. Definitely
exactly.
not getting in.
But the call it the magic of it is there's a ton
Yeah.
of shows out there where your audience and like their audience, where they are complementary,
Hmm.
that you could definitely get some brand exposure and get on
Yeah.
those shows. And but it's finding them. So like
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, those are the three ways I would say. It's either go through an agency, do
Hmm.
the digging on your own with some different tools, or like I say, Pod Engine's another one that's a really good search tool. That's their beta testing.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think that's going to be a great tool, Pod Engine, because I do know a lot of founders that want to get on podcasts, but they just don't have the time to find. And when they do, you only find those that are already very popular and have invested in becoming really popular. And getting on them, you meet the gatekeeper or someone that just doesn't reply or doesn't respond to whatever
exactly.
you're saying. Yeah, that's those are pretty great. Something I was thinking about is more on like the operational side of things. What would you say is the thing that folks easily get wrong? Right. So a lot of things could be done wrong, but what's the easiest to just fail at that has obviously the most impact? And if they fix it, could make like a huge difference. Is it from setup to maybe the guests, or what things exactly? Or if there's one thing you feel is the easiest to get wrong?
Yeah, I think starting out, uh, just get a decent mic. Like that sounds
Yeah.
kind of basic, but and you don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on a microphone because
Hmm.
honestly, they're not worth it and you're not going to notice a difference. But but getting a decent microphone for 50, $100 US, like you can get a great microphone that's a USB that
Hmm.
plugs right into your laptop. You don't need any type of audio board or anything like that, but
Yeah.
just get something that's clean and easy to use. Get some, get a headset, headphones, earbuds, something like that, so you can hear clearly. I think those are two of the biggest things that people can get wrong out of the gate, because how you sound matters. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect,
Hmm.
but you can have bad video and people will forgive you if your audio is pretty good. But if
Yeah.
if if your video is great and your audio is not, they ding you for that.
True.
So I think that's one thing.
Yeah.
I guess another thing would just be learn how to get comfortable on
Hmm.
camera if you're going to do video. And I know there's so
Yeah.
much being pushed toward video, but just get comfortable being on camera and hearing your own voice. Because for
Oh.
everybody listening, like I'll tell you, those first 10 episodes, I didn't even listen to them. Like I just sent them off and hit publish because
Yeah.
I couldn't bear to hear my own voice. It wasn't like it was bad, but I just couldn't bear to hear it. And so after years of editing my own stuff, I'm fine with my voice now. But you just have to get used to this being on
Hmm.
camera, and that just takes some practice. Sometimes just with your phone, and you just record you and you just riff and go with it until you get comfortable seeing yourself on camera.
Yeah.
So that can be
Yeah.
something, because especially on camera, your body language, how you present yourself, it can add or detract.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I've met folks that are like guests are pretty, really nervous on camera. And I'm like, it's just us. Just imagine you're on a walk call with one other person. Forget everyone else.
That's
Just
it.
forget everyone else out there.
That's it. If you can be comfortable on like a Google Meet or a Zoom
Yeah.
call at work, you're fine here.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally fine. And then I think this also stops them from starting out. So while we're on the topic of starting out, what are the things you feel like anyone out there that's listening out and they want to get started today? How do they go from 0 to 1 with a podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best way to think of it is, instead of thinking I'm going to start this and do this forever, right? Because that can feel overwhelming, especially once you get to episode 3 and you're thinking, I've
Yeah.
just committed to doing this for the rest of my life. There's no way.
Yeah.
Is start out with this idea of I'm going to do a season and test it out. So for example, you're going to say,
Okay.
I'm going to commit to doing 10 to 12 episodes. And at the end of that time, I will evaluate. And if I want to keep doing it, that's great. If I don't want to keep doing it, that's great. If I realize I need to do something totally different, or I absolutely hate doing it, whatever it is, if you give yourself 10 to 12 episodes, you will have done enough to at least figure that out. You'll also, at that point in time, like 10 to 12 seasons is enough to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to do another season and prepare for that one. If you don't want to, just keep going. I think that can help take some pressure off, just knowing that, okay, I'm going to do 10, because if you as a business, if you as a creator, if you're like, okay, 10 episodes, what can I talk about? You can come up with 10 episodes, or who are 10 people I can talk to? 10 people is very manageable. And then once you do that, once you commit to that, then the second thing is get your guests lined up, get your topics lined up. And then before you launch officially, get some recordings done. So you want to have ideally 4 or 5 recordings made before you launch initially, so that when you do, you're not sort of behind, you're not pressed on deadlines. Which is it's stressful. It's really stressful, especially in the early days. So like if you're thinking about what are the big things I need to think through, okay, 10 to 12 episodes, who can I talk to? Am I willing to do that? That's really the starting point. And then you can ask the questions like, okay, how do I physically do this? Like, what are the tools? What do I need to make it happen? And then, do I need help to make these happen, or can I do it on my own? Like, all of those are questions to figure out.
Yeah. I love the way of thinking of these in terms of like season, right? I also feel like it sets some sort of like a virtual milestone for you. Once you've recorded 10, 12 episodes, you're like, how did these go? What did I do well or not? Just like shows, you could be like, okay, I think season 2 is going to be this way, or I'm going to change this thing. It also gives you time to like switch stuff out, like mentally decide, okay, I can move stuff around. So that's a really good one.
It is. And the other thing is, as you go into it, especially as you're telling your audience, hey, we're doing season 1, we're going to hit 10 episodes, we're going to hit 12 episodes, whatever number it is, you have set an expectation with your audience that, okay, I'm going to be here for 10 episodes. So when you get to the end, there's not like this, what happened? Like, I thought we had this show going, and because podcast listeners, they find their shows that they like, and it gets in their queue, and it becomes like calendar viewing. Like every Thursday, I want to see this show. Like your listeners and your viewers are like, hey, every Wednesday, I'm looking for it. So, it just sets an expectation.
Yeah, that's great. And I do know, say for instance, they've got this going, they've started. It's great to have some wins, right? Some quick win, because you just get some dopamine and you feel good about. I think this is good. I think I'm going to be like a podcast superstar. Be like Sam Parr from My First Million, or like one of these guys. I'm going to be that good after the first ones. And I guess the key to this is, growing an audience, or at least finding an audience first. Maybe you found an audience, or maybe you didn't, but you need to grow an audience either way. What are some of the ways you suggest folks grow an audience after they've started, assuming they just started on a whim?
Yeah, I think ideally you want to get your show, you want to get yourself in front of podcast listeners. So what I mean by that is, you can post a ton of stuff on LinkedIn. You can post a ton of stuff on Instagram, and people may comment, they may give you a thumbs up, they may like, they may reshare. But the hard part is, everybody on LinkedIn and Instagram does not necessarily listen to a podcast. So conversely, if you get on somebody else's show, well, like, you're already in front of people who listen. So like you're automatic, you've already lowered the barrier because of the medium involved. when you invite people on your show, okay, you get to borrow their audience. Like if they promote it and they're, to their listeners and to their viewers, they get to hear you. And so that helps get your brand out there. So really
Yeah.
the best way is if you can get in front of other audio or other listeners. And that could be even something like, hey, I just want to give you a quick announcement. Let me give you, just talk with somebody. Hey, I want to recommend show XYZ. It's,
Yeah.
it's hosted by, whoever. And then
Yeah.
you do that for somebody else and they do that for you. And you just get into this routine of just being able to get that message out there.
Yeah. That would that would definitely help. I guess jumping on like sharing audience, it could be either complimentary or just an audience in general. And I love the point of finding folks that already listen to or that are willing to listen to podcasts, because it's not a medium everyone prefers to listen to stuff on. I listen to podcasts when I'm having breakfast, for instance. I just find an episode and just listen to one. And it may be others like me, but I know a lot of other people do not really listen to podcasts. They just watch something else.
And that's an excellent point. I think that's the beauty of then being able to honestly to do something like you're doing, where you're repurposing, where you're saying, okay, I'm going to create this audio file, but
Hmm.
man, I'm dropping a video on YouTube. I'm dropping it on
Yeah.
LinkedIn because YouTube works in a similar way. Want people who watch a lot of videos on YouTube will check out the
Hmm.
YouTube version, whereas
Yeah.
they may never listen to anything.
Yeah.
They may never listen to the audio. So that
Hmm.
repurposing can definitely help with that in
Yeah.
terms of reach.
Yeah. That's you're very right. And for anyone listening, I use StreamYard. Shout out to the guys at StreamYard. Um, Great folks. I use StreamYard to record podcasts, and so far they've just been very low effort. And with StreamYard, I connected to multiple sources. I found out something. I think I mentioned this also before the start of the stream, that we get active listeners the most from Twitter. We get sort of like the people just coming back from work and checking out stuff on their feed. We get a lot of those post stream listeners from LinkedIn, and then the longer form or the longer tail people that watch like multiple episodes in one, they watch those on YouTube. So it's just great streaming to multiple destinations. And I think someone from our marketing usually puts this on TikTok, put clips clips of it everywhere, so people just find shorts from them.
Absolutely. And that's what I do. I use a really cool tool called Opus Clips and upload
Mhm.
it, and it chops some clips for me. And I'll do shorts for TikTok and YouTube, and I sometimes I'll use them on LinkedIn. I'll use them on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, you can
Yeah.
any of those where you can just take what you've done and send them
Yeah.
somewhere else. There's no use recreating the wheel.
Yeah. So I do know I've heard at least a number of founders that want to get started with podcasting, but again, they don't have like the time.
Mhm.
They don't have the setup in the organization to just deal with that, but they know it's something they need to work with. How can you help? So this is me just like asking, because I saw from LinkedIn that you could help folks with something
Mhm.
like this. So how do you help typically, and what can they expect after working with you?
Absolutely. So, several different ways, but the way I like to think of, the ideal way, especially, man, if you're a founder and like you're just trying to stay above water, right? You are just like you're doing everything. And so you may have a small team. I say a small team. It's not like you have a small marketing team. Like you just have like a small team. Like you are like 10 or 12 people that are trying to get this thing going. Um,
Hmm.
the one way is definitely with something that's I call it a done for you podcast. And the idea is, man, we'll set it up so where the invite magically appears on your calendar
Okay.
and we handle the rest. So all you got to do is show up to eat the dessert
Yeah.
and everything else is taken care of. And so that comes from, handling front end stuff from, what I think of as, the pre-production of, you know, cultivating and identifying who would be great guests.
Mm-hmm.
The second aspect is then communicating with those guests and getting those, and then onboarding those guests, and that's
Yeah.
as well as after the show, getting them the information and all that, so it's done for you. And on the back end, it's really just where you would say, here's the files, and
Yeah.
then we create, we do the editing, we create, we do the podcast, we do video, we can take and do basically all the pieces parts that we can then hand back to you. We can send to your guests so that they have it. And so it just, it sort of a done for you process where you just show
Mm-hmm.
up and do it. We can do research for you, or we can do either the front or the back end. It just depends.
Yeah.
And the same thing, if you're like, I don't know that I want to do the whole guest thing. What if I just want to do like some solo stuff? Like, we can do
Yeah.
that too. That's easy to do as well with the same type setup. But yeah, so our
Yeah.
goal really is to make it easy for you to do business, because the podcast isn't your business. It's just a tool for your business to get leads, to build trust, and ultimately to drive
Yeah.
revenue.
Yeah, that's great. So for any founders, listening to this at any point in time, if you want to get it done for you podcast, I just want to chat about podcasts, I'm sure you know where to look. Just tell Eric Williams sent you. And that's
Absolutely.
that should definitely do it. At the start of our conversation, you mentioned the build pod, the B2B podcon that's coming up in Nashville. Could you speak
Yes.
a bit more about that? What can folks expect from that conference?
Yeah.
Because I
So
know a
we
number of
are
people are looking to attend conferences in around like October, November, when it's starting to get cold.
absolutely. So Nashville in November is the best time of year. The reason
Oh,
we don't do it in the summer is 90 plus degrees and hot and humid. So we don't want you doing that. We want you to come in here
yeah,
during the good part of the year.
yeah,
But the other part is we just wanted to provide a place where people in the B2B space, whether you're an agency, whether you're in the software space, whether your business has a podcast that they use to generate leads, we want to provide a
mm-hmm,
place where you can come together, where you can network, where you can have some conversations, and where you can learn from some experts in the field. Because as I've looked at all the conferences out there, they do a wonderful job of a whole lot of information, but we didn't see anything that was focused solely on the B2B space. And B2B podcasting is a different sort of animal. I mean, it's just a different function, because again, the goal isn't to try and get to 10,000 downloads. The goal is to move people down the pipeline for sales. And
yeah,
so B2B podcasts have some similarities, but definitely some differences, both from gaining efficiency in production, both pre and post.
mm-hmm,
Um, Things like, how do I get listeners? But then how do I move people from listener to sale? And so really it's
mm-hmm,
that whole funnel spectrum where you're not just trying to grab listeners, you're
yeah,
trying to ultimately get customers. And so that's
mm-hmm,
what we want to cover there. And we just want to provide a place where you can talk to people and ask questions. And it's downtown Nashville. So you are just, a short walk from some of the best music and food you will find anywhere in the US. And so
yeah.
it's just a great place to be. So yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, that's great. I bet it's going to be like a really great place for anyone interested in podcasts in general, and including like B2B podcasts to just be in. And again, like you said, understand how to move prospects or contacts from either being cold to warm, or just move them along in the pipeline somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's our goal. And you get to talk to people who've done it before. So
yeah,
you're not having you get to
yeah.
benefit from their experience.
Yeah, and leading into like a bit of your marketing experience now, how does that actually work, right? Because and I'm just asking because personally I want to know. I've just been recording this podcast as like a way to talk to great people and just keep it going. But how, if you could share a strategy, one of multiple strategies on how to get prospect from maybe cold to warm, or just move them along the
Mhm.
pipeline with a podcast, how would that work?
Absolutely. So I think several different things. One thing is, with your podcast, give them one clear call to action. So
Mhm.
if your business has a podcast and there is one thing you would like them to do, maybe it's like, I want you to subscribe to our newsletter. Maybe it's like, I want you to do, I've got a freebie for you if you go here, or whatever it is, like something to get them to act. I think that's important, whether
Yeah.
you're a guest or a host, like having that available. Another thing is really showing your expertise in the process. So that could be, adding a summary at the end about, hey, these are my takeaways from the show, just to make sure that they see you as the expert. A third
Mhm.
way is just making sure that as you are building these relationships, especially with guests, like the one of the coolest things about this is, I have contact with guests I had on the show a year and a half ago, and like this is
Yeah.
just a fantastic partnership opportunity just between host and guest, and just building those
Yeah.
relationships. And then even just being able to take this content and funnel it down through sales, like that.
Yeah.
It's just for sales to be able to use this and move it forward. Either from a clip, the whole thing, but
Mhm.
making it part of your CRM, your email distribution, emailing this out, using some fabulous tools that are out there where you can, pull emails from the transcript or pull posts
Yeah.
where you can just funnel that out. All of those things will help,
Mhm.
uh, build trust and move people down the pipeline.
Yeah. Those are really fantastic strategies. So far it's been like, the networking aspect of it for me, just meeting cool people. Maybe we work on something together in the future or not, but
Mhm.
it's just always great to talk to amazing people. So thanks for those.
Yeah, yeah, you can. You can. I found I can talk to people on a podcast that I could never have a conversation with otherwise.
All right. Yeah, I can imagine. But anyways, thank you so much for coming on the pod. I see we're coming on, around time. So I just wanted to ask, is there anything else you want to add? Anything else you want to share with the audience? I'm happy to throw this in. Now, this has been a fantastic session,
Yeah, no,
otherwise.
I'm happy to. I appreciate the invite. So if you are interested in checking out the B2B PodCon, the best way to do that, go to the website the number 2B uh, podcon.com. And if you sign up with the code EOC, it's not there at the moment, but it will be later today. William and I were talking about this before the show, and I'm like, oh, I got to get that set up on the ticket. We'll take 10% off your ticket. We'll do this for a couple of weeks. Use that code. So I know where you came from. I definitely want, to encourage and support William. And man, I just want this
Yes.
to be a great experience for your listeners. There's also a virtual option. So for everybody who can't make it to Nashville, you can get access to the recordings. We're going to give you transcripts. We're working with a company to do like some like key takeaways and summaries, all of that be delivered to your inbox within like 2 weeks after the show. So whether you want to be in
Yeah.
person or virtual, check out b2bpodcon.com.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Eric. If you're looking for the URL, I have it on the screen here for anyone looking for it. It's B2B PodCon, and use the code EOC to get 10% off. And I hope you make it to Nashville for sure.
Absolutely. And if you're trying to get on, you're like, dude, like that code's not working, just email me. I'll square it up. We'll get it set up later today. So don't say,
Yeah.
oh, this doesn't work. Shoot, hit me on LinkedIn, and just go through the site, and we'll get you taken care of.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Eric. And for anyone else listening, if there's one thing I'll leave you with today, just hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube, or hit the repost button if you're on LinkedIn or Twitter, wherever you are. So someone else sees this. It's super easy. Yeah. All right then. I guess that's the pod. If it's Sam Parr,
All right.
well, that's what he would say. Let's have a
All right.
wonderful day then. Cheers.
Cheers.